The reason is that the things that are very good about globalization that connect us, like airport hubs, also spread bad things like pandemics.
Exactly, during this pandemic, in terms of, we could have better take advantage of globalization instead of just, being suffered from the consequences. Like, what went wrong exactly?
I think there are many things that have gone wrong here, and hopefully we can fix them. The first is that it took a long time to identify the pandemic, and by the time it was identified, it had already spread quite widely. We need to get much better at identifying pandemics at their source and containing them, stopping them, locking down the areas. If you wait a few weeks, it's much too long. The second thing is then we need a global coordination to adopt the measures that we have to adopt to slow the spread of the pandemic, particularly not only to deal with the medical emergency, which is happening everywhere, but particularly to help countries that are poor, African countries, Asian countries, which don't have the resources that China or European countries or the US have to do it. And then, of course, we're going to have much more cooperation to deal with the economic emergency, which is coming from the pandemic, which is going to be maybe even more dangerous.
In your view, would an organization like WHO be the solution for this kind of problems that globalization might have created for our society? Would a national organization be the solution for that?
The structure of the WHO needs to be reformed. So I see a future WHO like a NATO type of force, a military force that is based in all the regions, people that can respond very rapidly, that can within a few hours be in any city in the region, any place in the region, verify whether the pandemic is there and contain it and stop it.
In your opinion, if countries would start relocating their factories back to their own country, would that be like a bigger risk for the globalization that we are currently having?
I do not believe the response needs to be the relocation of production. The response can also be that one has stocks domestically, which is, for example, the response of Switzerland. Switzerland has stocks of medical equipment at home and in their country. And that is another way of guaranteeing supply of vital resources, not only of medical equipment, but you can do the same with food and other emergency supplies. But supply chain fragmentation is changing. The pandemic will reinforce tendencies in globalization, which already existed before the pandemic. And one of them is on supply chains. This is not because of the pandemic. In my view, it is because of other things happening, namely robotics, automation, 3D printing, are making it possible to produce close to home. I believe that there will be big investments in China because of the market size of China and the growth of the market of China. China is going to exit this pandemic first. Its economy will recover first, and because of the scale of the population and the size of growth, its growth potential is still the biggest in the world in terms of market. So my view is that we will see a slowing of the fragmentation of supply chains. That was happening anyway, but it's not deglobalization because we will see increased investment flows.
If the future is not about deglobalization, what kind of new type of globalization which we should have, in your opinion?
We need a globalization which is managed to make sure we reduce the risks and harvest the opportunities. All countries benefit from globalization, but not all aspects of globalization are good. Pandemics are one, cybercrime and cyber insecurity is another, climate change is another, antibiotic resistance is another, financial crises. But if we kill globalization in order to stop the bad things, we're killing all of our prospects. China has made such progress because of its opening and integration with the world. And the same is true of every country in the world. And so the option is not to say, let's stop globalization, let's deglobalize. That would be a disaster, particularly a disaster for poor people around the world. We need to say, how do we stop these bad aspects? How do we work together with the key actors, the key countries, in order to stop the negative aspects? And in the pandemic at the moment, we see this as particularly significant.